This is The Unhurried Mama, a space for mothers who are tired of holding it together and ready to actually land. I'm Michelle, and I'm a mom, a writer, but not an expert. I'm here as someone still figuring this out, doing it my way, and refusing to pretend it's perfect. Every week, we sit together and untangle one piece of the parenting knot. No tips or fixes, I promise. Just the mess, the science, and the path back to you. So pour yourself some coffee or tea, close the door, and let's begin right where we are. Last week, I told you about the afternoon my son came into my office shaking, and what unfolded over 97 minutes on my lap. That was co-regulation at its most tender, the kind that almost looks beautiful from the outside. This week is the other version, the version that involves a pair of scissors, a slammed door, and the 5 words I never expected to hear from my 8-year-old daughter. If you've ever given a consequence you knew was too harsh before you had even finished the sentence, this is that story. And it doesn't end where you think it does. I was chopping vegetables when it started. My hands were moving, but my brain was somewhere between the electricity bill and whether anyone was going to eat what I was making. I'm sure you know that feeling. It had already been one of those days. Bedtime still felt like it was 12 hours away, and I was counting down every single one. Then I heard shouting from the living room. "Hey, why did you spit on me?" Then the sound of bare feet slapping vinyl plank in that loop our house makes. Kitchen to dining room, to living room, to hallway, and back again. A racetrack my kids have worn invisible grooves into. More chasing noises and feet scrambling. Then that sound, wet and deliberate, that you can't unhear once you've heard it. Then my son's voice, high-pitched and outraged. "Ew! Mama! She just spat on me!" I put the knife down and charged into the living room. My pulse was already spiking before I rounded the corner, cheeks flushed, that hot wave of adrenaline flooding up through my chest and into my throat. I had one fist clenched at my side, and the other hand was pointing an accusing finger aimed straight at my daughter. "What is going on here? Spitting is so rude and not allowed, ever. It's so disrespectful. You're not allowed to play outside with your friends for a week." Her most favorite thing in the world, gone, delivered in 6 seconds flat, while my body vibrated with a fury that had nothing to do with saliva and everything to do with a story already running in my head. How dare she? Have I not taught her anything about being a kind person? We've gone over this. No hitting, kicking, biting, or spitting. What am I doing wrong? Her face scrunched and her arms flailed around in distress. "What? That's not fair. He spat on me first." My son, indignant, said, "It was an accident. You spat on me way harder." "No outside time for a week. That's final." She glared at me, an 8-year-old girl with her body gone rigid, arms locked straight at her sides, and a jaw trembling between rage and heartbreak. And then she turned, ran up the stairs, screaming, "I hate you!" and slammed her bedroom door hard enough to rattle the hallway photos. She fled the space she was standing in because it didn't feel safe anymore. Not with me in it, not with my voice still ringing off the walls and my finger still pointing. So she did what any of us would do when we don't feel safe. She got out. As I stood cemented in the living room, pulse still hammering, I heard my conscience underneath the anger whispering, "That was too much, Michelle. A whole week for spit?" I pushed it down and went back to the kitchen to finish dinner. When it was time to eat, we called up the stairs, but there was no answer. So we ate without her. Her chair sat empty at the table, and nobody mentioned it. I told myself she needed time to cool off, which was probably true, but I also needed distance from my own guilt, because the quieter voice was getting louder now, and I didn't want to hear it yet. At one point, we heard footsteps moving around upstairs, but I didn't think anything of it. After the kitchen was mostly cleaned up, I went upstairs to my office and came to a screeching halt in the doorway. On my desk, a pile of tiny pieces of paper, dozens of them in various sizes, some as small as confetti. They were my notes from a workshop, a live session with no replay, ideas and connections I had scribbled messily because they were coming faster than I could capture them, and a how-to list for plans that mattered to me. All of it, reduced to scraps so small, it would take me an hour to piece them back together, if I even could. My stomach dropped, and then an instinct rose behind it, almost animal-like. This isn't the only thing she touched. I walked into my ensuite bathroom. My bath towel was lying in a heap on the floor. I picked it up and saw the 2 small, deliberate snips. Scissor marks. From where I stood, I could see into the bedroom. The edge of my pillowcase, also snipped. And my blanket, my favorite blanket, the one I'd earned through a business incentive, the softest thing I'd ever owned as an adult, the one I wrapped myself in for a good night's sleep. It represented months of effort and years of building something I was proud of. She'd taken scissors to that too. I stood there and I mapped out what she had done. The notes from my brain, the towel for my body, the pillowcase where I lay my head, and the blanket I pulled around myself every night. She hadn't thrown a tantrum. She'd gone on a quiet, methodical tour of my most private spaces and cut into every layer of my world. Carefully, deliberately, while we ate dinner below her. This wasn't your usual visible outburst. It was precision from a child who knew exactly where to aim. I started breathing hard and heavy, rough breaths through my nose, the kind where your rib cage feels like it's shrinking. My body was tipping into fight mode. I could feel the tension stacking in my shoulders, my jaw locking in real time. I said something under my breath that I won't repeat on this podcast. The old pattern was right there, inches away from taking over. The tornado Michelle would have made sure the whole street heard what came next. She would have piled consequence on top of consequence until her daughter understood who held the power in this house. She probably would have said something she'd carry for years. I grabbed the shredded notes in my fist and flew down the stairs. My husband was at the kitchen counter, finishing up the last of the dishes. He must have seen it on my face because his hands stopped moving before I said a word. I told him about the notes, and the towel, the pillowcase, and the blanket. All of it. He looked at me, at my face, at the torn paper in my hand, and asked, "What are you going to do?" He didn't offer outrage or a plan, just a question. He'd been there the numerous nights I told him how important it was for me to change, to not blow up anymore, to use a softer tone, to become the kind of mother I kept being shown in the parenting course I was working through. He'd even listened to parts of it with me. He knew what I was reaching for, even if he wasn't always reaching for it himself. And somehow, that bare question handed me back my own agency, like someone turning on a light in a room you forgot you were standing in. None of the things I had been learning, the books, the course I had only half finished, the conversations with friends further along than me, had fully landed yet. Most of it was still theoretical. But standing in that kitchen, with my husband's question still hanging in the air, something I had absorbed without even knowing where it came from surfaced just enough to create a gap between the trigger and my response. The accumulated residue of every attempt I had made to change, finally finding a crack. And in that gap, I stopped seeing my failure. I started seeing her. And I want to stop here for a second because I need to know I'm not the only one. Tell me I'm not alone in this. That moment where your child does something inappropriate or disrespectful, and your very first thought isn't about them. It's about you. What did I do wrong? Why haven't they learned this? Have I failed? Every single time. Like a default setting I never agreed to. I made it about me instead of about her. But holding a fistful of shredded paper, I saw her. Really saw her. I saw an 8-year-old who had been shamed in front of her brother, who'd had the thing she loved most taken away in a single sentence, who hadn't been sent to her room, but had run there because the room she was standing in didn't feel safe. She had scissors, open doors, and an hour of pain, with nowhere to go. I hadn't seen any of that upstairs. All I'd seen was defiance. A child who hadn't learned what I'd tried so hard to teach. And from that place, the only options are punish harder or fall apart. But there was another option. I just couldn't see it until his question cleared the smoke. I went upstairs, knocked on her door, and asked her to come out. We sat down together on the hallway floor, not in her room where the walls still held the weight of everything that had happened. We needed a neutral ground with just space between us. I spread out the things she had cut, the notes, corners of the towel, and the edges of the pillowcase and blanket. I didn't raise my voice. I simply asked her if she had done it. She wouldn't look at me. She sat there, hugging her knees, rocking slightly, still holding onto the anger, but underneath it, afraid, uncertain of what was to come next. She nodded. I understand that you were angry at me, I said, and you're allowed to be angry. But it's never okay to destroy other people's things. She glanced up at me, quick, searching, then away again, checking whether this was real or whether I was just being calm before dropping something worse. You can be mad, I said. You can be so mad at me you need to scream into a pillow or stomp your feet or tell me you hate me. But we don't hurt each other's things. Another nod, still guarded and still bracing. And here's where I made the choice that changed the night. I told her that instead of sending her back to her room to sit and think about what she had done, which would only make her feel worse and smaller and more certain that she was a bad person, we were going to do our one-on-one special time. 15 minutes of just us, like we always did every night. Her expression shifted. It wasn't relief. She was confused, like the words didn't match the situation she was in. She had destroyed my things. She had spat at her brother. She had screamed that she hated me. And now I was saying I wanted to be with her? I wasn't going to create more distance between us by pushing her further away when she was already this far out. I knew it in my body. Something in my chest had settled when I said it out loud, like my own nervous system was confirming the decision before my mind could second guess it. I asked her what she wanted to do. She chose to play a card game Phase 10, and we played right there on the hallway floor. The first few rounds were quiet. She played carefully, watching me more than the cards, still testing and still questioning whether this version of me was going to hold. The air between us was dense with everything the evening had piled up, but somewhere around the middle of the game, I felt it, a loosening, like a held breath finally letting go. Her shoulders came down, her legs stretched out to the side instead of pulled tight against her chest. She leaned on one arm. Her voice got a little lighter when she called out her phase. And then, after the heaviness had lifted just enough for honesty, she looked up at me and said, "Why aren't you punishing me?" 5 words, and every single one of them told me what she had been expecting. More consequences, more distance, love pulled back like a privilege she hadn't earned. That was the pattern she knew, the one I had been unintentionally teaching her every time I reacted from the flood instead of choosing from solid ground. I told her the truth. "I understand why you did what you did. You were hurt, and you thought hurting me would make it better. But it didn't, did it?" She shook her head. "Then you felt bad about hurting me. That's why you admitted what you did." She nodded slowly. "If I just kept punishing you and hurting you and repeating that pattern, we'd probably end up really hating each other, right?" She was quiet, pensive and processing, and I could see it moving through her, the weight of what I had said landing somewhere deeper than words. Then simply, "Yeah, I think so." And there it was. An hour and a half earlier, she'd screamed, "I hate you," from the stairs. Now she was sitting on the hallway floor, legs starting to unfold, quietly agreeing that the cycle of punishment and pain would only take us further apart. Same word, hate. Completely different place. One was from her flood, and this one was from my ground. She didn't say much after that, but her body said everything. The last of the guardedness melted away. She was just a kid, playing a card game with her mom on the floor, and for the first time all night, that was enough. The timer on my phone went off and we cleaned up the cards. I stood to put them on the shelf in the hall closet, and when I turned back, I pulled her in. She went completely still. I felt it build, the emotions pressing upward through her chest, that resistance right before everything breaks open. First, it was a quiet leak, her tears slipping down her cheeks, almost soundless. And then her body let go, all the anger and fear and confusion and loneliness she had been carrying since the moment it all started, moving through her at once. I stroked her hair tenderly, kissed her forehead, once, twice. "I love you." Her arms tightened around my waist as she pressed her head into my chest. She was exactly that height, where her arms wrapped perfectly around me and her ear landed right over my heartbeat. We stayed like that for a while, until her breathing slowed and matched mine. And then quietly she said, "I'm sorry I cut up your things, Mama. I won't ever do that again." And she has kept her word since. After she went to bed, I collapsed onto mine. Not from exhaustion, though I was exhausted, but from the weight of finally knowing I could do this. I lay there and let myself sink into something I can only describe as peaceful knowing. the kind that lives in your bones and not your brain. I had been in the fire, and I hadn't burned the house down. And I want to sit here just for a minute, because I think this is the part we skip. We talk a lot about what to do when our kids lose it. And we don't talk enough about what's happening inside us in those moments, and why the thing that feels most instinctual is usually the thing that does the most damage. When I found those shredded notes, my nervous system didn't say, let's think about this rationally. It said, threat. Same system, same chemicals, same fight or flight response we have talked about. The one that doesn't know the difference between a bear and a pile of torn paper. My body was preparing for battle with an 8-year-old who weighed maybe 50 pounds. And here's what I know now that I was only beginning to learn then. When we're flooded, when the adrenaline is surging and our pulse is pounding, and we can feel the heat in our face, we lose access to the part of our brain that can see our child clearly. The prefrontal cortex, the part that does empathy and perspective and long-term thinking, essentially goes offline. And what's left running the show is the part that only knows how to fight, flee, or freeze. That's why consequences delivered in the flood are almost always too harsh. They're not coming from wisdom. They're coming from survival. A week of no outside time, her favorite thing, for spitting. That wasn't a measured, thoughtful response. That was my nervous system swinging a sledgehammer because it thought we were under attack. And my daughter, she couldn't separate what she did from who she was. At 8 years old, kids don't have that wiring yet. When I charged in with my fist clenched and my finger pointing and my voice sharp enough to cut glass, she didn't hear. That was a poor choice. She heard, I am bad. I am unlovable when I mess up. Love goes away when I get it wrong. And when a child that age believes love has been withdrawn, their pain has to go somewhere. If nobody helps them hold it, they'll find a target. That's attachment science, masked as defiance. That's a child saying, in the only language available to them, you hurt me. Do you still love me? Even now? The child who's pushing you the hardest is usually the one who needs you the closest. Not because they're testing you, but because they're terrified you'll leave. The answer I gave her that night, sitting on the hallway floor, playing Phase 10, staying when everything in my history told me to punish or withdraw, that answer was yes. And that yes is what repair actually looks like. You hold the boundary, but also the child at the same time. But repair doesn't always look like a hallway floor and a card game. It was errand day a few weeks later, and we were driving around dropping off donations at the thrift store, grabbing gluten-free favorites for my son at the local health food store, and shopping for a present for an upcoming birthday party. As we got on the road, I told them I needed to squeeze in a delivery for my customer and get my glasses fixed at the mall. My daughter huffed from the back seat. Ugh, why do we always have to do extra things? It always takes so long. And I snapped, well, not everything is about you. I watched her face in the rearview mirror as her eyes narrowed, then turned away and stared at the passing cars. We drove in silence for a few minutes, long enough for me to feel what was actually underneath. Not her complaint, but my exhaustion. The feeling that my life revolved around everyone else's needs. And the one time I added something for myself, I got resistance. So as I pulled into the parking lot, I said it. I'm sorry I snapped. That wasn't fair. I'm just tired of feeling like everyone else's needs come first. And when I need something, it's a problem. But that's not yours to carry, and I shouldn't have spoken to you like that. She was quiet for a second. Then she said she was sorry too, that she hadn't thought about it that way. And that's it. It wasn't phase 10 on the hallway floor. Just a mother who caught herself between the highway and a parking lot, told the truth about what was underneath, and a daughter who met her there. That's repair too. I want to be honest about something. I didn't get there on my own that night. I got there because my husband asked me a question that landed at exactly the right time. And because every small, unglamorous repetition I had been practicing, the times I left the room instead of yelling, the deep breaths that didn't work, the meditations that felt so hard to sit through, and all the tears in a parked car. All those things had eventually built just barely enough space between the trigger and my response to make a different choice. None of those felt like progress at the time, but every single one of them was. So here's what I want to leave you with this week. Think about the last time your child was at their worst, the moment that made your whole body clench. You don't have to go far back. It might have been this morning. Now ask yourself, not with judgment, just with curiosity, what was my child actually trying to tell me underneath the behavior? Not what they were doing, but what were they feeling? What did they need me to see that I couldn't see because my own nervous system was on fire? And like always, you don't have to have an answer right now. You just need to sit with the question. And if you want a practice to take with you, next time you feel the flood rising, before you give the consequence, before you deliver the sentence, try this. Put both feet flat on the floor. Feel the ground underneath you. Take one breath, just one, and ask yourself, am I responding to my child or reacting to my nervous system? That pause, that one breath of space, is where repair begins. Before the conversation, before the reconnection, before any of it, it starts with your feet on the floor and the willingness to choose differently, even when your body is screaming at you to do what you've always done. And you won't get it right every time. I still don't. One day, that space will be wide enough to hold both your child's pain and your own at the same time, without either of you breaking. And that's the work. You're already in it. Next week, I'm telling you about bedtime and why my son wouldn't go near the bathroom. It wasn't until I stopped trying to fix the behavior and actually asked him what was wrong that I found out what was really going on. And it opened my eyes in a way I'll never forget. If you've ever looked at your child's bad behavior and wondered what's underneath it, that one is going to hit differently. If today's episode landed for you, please share it with one mom who needs to hear that repair doesn't have to look pretty. It just has to show up. For weekly show notes and free meditations, subscribe on Substack. I'll drop the link in the episode description. Until next time, keep showing up, even in the repair.